Hello and welcome to our weekly share with the commentary of the Alshich. It's Parshas Mishpatim. It is late yet again. I do apologize, but as I've told you, when you're moving continents and you've packed up all your belongings, things are a little bit hard to organize, as I have discovered. Okay, so I hope you had a good Shabbos, and I hope you've got a forthcoming good Shabbos as well. I can't promise next week I'll be able to record the share because I am going away for Shabbos. I'm going to be in Young Israel of Forest Hills in Queens in New York, doing a Shabbaton there. Who knows? You might be in the area and pop into one of the Shiur or the events. It'd be very nice to see you. Let's start as we normally do with wishing those who need a refuah shlema a refuah shlema. And so I have my list on my phone, so I will just get that available. So let's start with Chaim Chadov ben Esther ben Yomen Zeid ben Yafa Henienta. Aryaleb ben Yafa Henienta. That's my son who was hit by a bus yesterday. The mirror of the bus hit him when he was walking along from behind on the head. Baruch Hashem, he seems to be fine, but he should have a refuah shalema. Rafael Chai ben Sarah or Echem Mecham Yehudis. Sarah Risa, got it all wrong. Rafael Chaim ben Sarah, got that right. Orechem ben Chani Yehudis. And then, hold on, Shivashena bas Pinina Chana. Yichil Michel ben Devarlea, Vega bas Sarah. And Vega Roiser bas Fruma Malka. Chana Gittel bas Lea Malka. Chaya, Freda, Leah, Bas Rochel, and Rochel Levana Bas Shirley, they should all have a refuah shalema. So this week's Pasha. I was in shul. This week's Pasha, of course, apart from being Pasha Mishpatim, is also when we announced and blessed the forthcoming, the new moon, Birchas HaKodesh, for Adar, the month in which Purim takes place. And I was looking at the words which I've looked at literally thousands of times in my life before, and a phenomenon we've discussed many times in our share together. Isn't it strange how sometimes the words that you have seen thousands of times before, suddenly you see something completely new and mysterious and baffling, and you think, why didn't I think about that before? This is the bit. It's a hero sign, which we start off asking Hashem that he should give us a good month. And then it says, Mosh Misha also Nisam Lavsena, he who gave or did miracles for our fathers, but God the Son of me Abdus he took them out from slavery to freedom. Who you go son of Bakorov? Let him do the same for us as well. The Yikabitz Nidochenu the Arba Campus Ors, and gather the whole of the Jewish people from the four corners of the earth. Chaverim Kol Yisrael, the Jewish people should all be Chaverim friends. V'nomar Amen. Amen. And it just struck me that it sounded as being a bit strange. We know that when Yaakov goes to confront his brother Esau, when Yaakov goes to confront his brother Esau, famous story, of course, which we covered not too long ago, not too many weeks ago, then he prepares himself for three things. He prepares himself for war, and he splits the camp into two camps so that if one is attacked, there would be a chance for the survival of the other. Then he prepares himself for peace negotiations, and he sends all sorts of gifts to his brother to appease him for the contempt he feels towards Yaakov, and the absolute certainty in his mind that Yaakov cheated him out of the status of the firstborn, ignoring the fact he didn't want it, but leaving that aside. And then, of course, he also prepared himself for prayer. But in the general historic Jewish philosophical perspective of the Jewish people, being in two camps is always seen as being a good thing. The Ashkenaz world and the Sephardi world, the Jews of Persia, the Jews of Rome, the two great empires of those days. So if Jews in Israel, which was under the Romans, are in trouble, then at least there'll be a survival of the Jews in Persia. These sorts of dynamics that played out all the way through Jewish history. And yet we're asking to bring all the Jews together in one place. Doesn't that run counter to the general idea of splitting the camp, not putting all your eggs or all your Jews in one place? And that's what struck me. I mentioned this in my share, because the share that we do now, normally I record it on Thursday and then say it to my Mashir and Shabbos and Shul. However, the last few weeks has been the other way about. Somebody said it's talking about when the Mashiach comes. I see, but why is it that we have to wait for the Mashiach to come, as we can provoke him coming, and then again we would all be together? It's a bit of a twisted argument, that, because we can, in actual fact, do the things that can make the Mashiach come, but one of them would be being in the land of Israel. That's before the Mashiach comes. And that's putting all our eggs in one basket. Okay. So in this week's parsha, of course, as you'll remember, usually say as you'll see on Shabbos, but as you will remember, it's a change of gear in the Torah. From the narrative, from the story, from the drama of the Exodus, and suddenly the brakes are put on, and now we're going into law. The Parshas Mishpatim, law after law after law, and it starts off, of course, famously by talking about the concept of slavery in Judaism, and of course, it's not slavery as in the classic sense. It's taking somebody who has stolen, who can't repay the bill, the theft, and his work is sold. He's an indentured laborer for 6 years in order to generate the money to repay the amount that he's stolen. That's how it works. And then it goes on to a whole list of more serious things, or seemingly more serious things. Not killing, different kinds of killing, manslaughter, intentional murder, laying in wait to ambush somebody, fighting, and also cursing parents, hitting parents, and all the consequences of these, hitting a slave. And all of these seem to be rather disconnected from one another. Let me just jump in and start. Where would be a good place to start? It really starts at Posset 12 in the verse 12 in the Sedra. But I think, let's start with, okay, Maki Ishomes, this is 12, might as well start there. You hit somebody and he dies, Mosiamas, then you will die. That's intentional. But Asher Lot said about like he didn't intentionally do, didn't lay in wait to ambush him. But him and Hashem brought it to your hand that you killed him accidentally. You were chopping wood and the axe head flies off the shaft of the axe and kills somebody. Then Hashem will prepare this, of course, for the cities of refuge, the Ori Miklot, you can run away there. And then Becky Yozid Ishal, but if you did wait to Lahorga in waiting for somebody to kill him, Baroma, Me'im is Bechi to just taken straight out after you've been found guilty and executed straight away. Maka over the Imag Mosiamos, and if you kill your mother and your father, sorry, if you hate your mother and your father, then you die for that. And Gonab Ish, kidnapping, carries the death penalty. And Mekala of Imoy, and if you curse your mother and father using God's name, that carries the death penalty. And then, I think we'll jump in here. Beki Yerivun, and this is Posset Yud Ches. So if you've got your little art scroll Chumash, or a big art scroll Chumash, it's on page 420. Beki Yerivun, Anoshim Behiko Ish Esrehu. So if men are quarreling, and one hits his fellow, Evan or Egrov, so either he throws a stone at him or he punches him. Beloyos, he doesn't kill him, but Nofel Mishkab, the blow is sufficient to make him have to take to his bed to recuperate for maybe a week or 2 weeks. Im Yokom Salach Bechutz al Mishantoy, he was able to get out and walk under his own steam. But Nika Hamaka, then it will be that the person who hit him will be freed. Let's see how the English translation goes here. I always like to quarrel through the eyes of the Alshich, as you know. If he gets up and goes by outside under his own power, the one who struck him is absolved. All right. Certainly that's a nice translation. But the Hebrew actually says, if he goes under his own steam, the Nika Hamaka, the man is, okay, absolved, relieved of guilt. Rak shiftoi. Only the amount of medical fees that has been incurred to get him to that to be well again. You're responsible, the person who hit him, to pay, and also for his lost wages. Rak shiftoi. Yitin, you'll give. Varapoi, yirapeh. and you will surely heal him. Let's just do one more pasuk. And if you turn around and hit your slave, or as a muscle, or your maidservant, b'shevet with a stick, or mace, tachas, yodai, menakim, and he dies, then you are killed for that. That's why I'm saying that slavery, as I mentioned before, is not the classic slavery that you had in America. Runaway slave was killed. Ach im yom o yamayim yamod lo yakam ki kasvahu. Ki inotza anoshim enokfu ish and then it's going to talk about another fight, and then a pregnant woman goes past, and when the pregnant woman is hit, and then it talks about what happens if there's a miscarriage, and so we're going back into different laws. But let's see what the Alshich has to say on this. So, if I could stretch over, come down, pick the Alshich up, and turn in my Alshich in this edition, it's in page Reish Nun Dalet. Reish Nun Dalet 245 and 54. And the Alshich says the following thing. After that whole list that we just went through, when the Torah talks about kidnapping and cursing your parents, etc., etc. The Torah then, in verse 18, says the Alshich, is telling you how it comes about that a person will actually get to that stage. How it just didn't happen. There's an evolution of events that brings you to these conclusions. Culminates with these various things. Shehu ki yerivan anoshim, if men fight, ki bezeh mishtalshel rois rabbas koi lekoi at osaniyeh. Because it will evolve. It will be an evolving process till it culminates actually in one killing the other. And so what does that start with? The Sipar Drakosam. So the Alshich says, I'll tell you how it starts. And that is ki mehariv bidvorim. So when it says the two people quarrel, that is ki yurivun. Yurivun means to quarrel, but it means verbally. You start off with a fight, which is a verbal fight, an argument about whatever. Whose football team's the best? I don't know, something like that. But it always starts with something small. I remember many years ago there was a book called 50 Days for 50 Years, which was brought out in England. And I was asked to write, I think, 4 chapters of the book, if I recall correctly. One of them was on the subject of intermarriage. And in that, my essay on intermarriage, I said, what is the formula for falling in love with a non-Jewish person, boy or girl, so, as it were, head over heels that you marry and marry out, that you cannot conceive of life without this person? What formula is it that gets you to that stage? Is it 3 dates, one at the movies, when you went ice skating, maybe a 4th date at a Chinese restaurant? Is that how it works? Physical, not physical? A night at the opera? I don't know. What formula is there? And the answer is obviously there is no formula. It's not 3 days, it's not 4 days, it's not 5 days. Maybe for somebody, all of those figures. But there's no set metric, no set, as it were, amount that guarantees that a Jewish person is going to marry out. One thing is, however, certain. Every intermarriage started with a date, with one single date. Every huge conflict, he says, starts in general with an argument, with a verbal fight between two people. So he says, Alshich, v'sipar drogosam. First, it's bidvorim, it's with words. Yimshach sheyika ish esroehu, and that will lead to the person, an escalation, when the person is throwing a stone at somebody else or punching him. Yimshach sheyika ish esroehu be'evan or be'egrif. That will cause you to either throw a stone or to punch. But the first time, he didn't cause his death. It was quite spontaneous, and a punch is very, very unlikely to kill anybody. And throwing a stone, I suppose, it depends on the size of the stone, but unlikely to kill. What it does is damage him enough that he has to go to the hospital, to the emergency room, and get better, or maybe over 2 weeks. But don't make an enormous mistake and say, well, since I didn't kill him, right? I just broke his nose. Noki hu midin shemayim. Ba'amar ra'ehu davar sarah kenegdei. That, all I have to do is to pay the medical bills, pay the lost wages of the 2 weeks or month that he's been off because of my action, and that's it. The scale that my account in heaven is cleared. Oh no, it's not. Ki halo gam yocham is halach b'chutz, because it says when he gets up and he's able to actually go out under his own steam, then you've got to, and you've paid for his, and you pay him at that point for his medical expenses, and you pay him for his lost wages. It's rak shifto yitain. So that's why I wanted to translate it in English so you see it. It's only that you've paid. Rak shifto. That's the verse that we looked at in Yud after he's been hit, now he's recovered, he's able to go under his own steam. But Naka, you are indeed, if you pay those two bills, you're absolved. Hamak rak shifta, but only from the results of the physical attack. What about the spiritual? What about the spiritual damage you've done to the person? The fact that he's lost earnings, the fact that he's had to pay medical bills, that's what you have to put right. However, ach botles malachas shemayim, ach bitl maka b'mitzvahs Hashem, adena amidus leparav l'pnei Elokim. But because he wasn't able to put on tefillin, because he wasn't able to get shul and daven, because he wasn't able to open a sefer and learn Torah, because he wasn't able to do the chesed that he normally does, and all of that is now deficient in the galactic and the scales of the Jewish people and the huge bank account in which the Jewish people, all of our positive deeds are weighed against our negative deeds. There's a deficit. That fellow's 2 weeks when he was in bed wasn't able to perform mitzvahs because of you. That has to be put right as well. Oh, you're quite happy because you put right the physical damage you've done? What about the spiritual damage you've done? How do you put that right? But apart from that, you've got to do something else. You've got to repair the lost mitzvahs, and you've also got to repair your soul. You broke his nose, but you got a broken soul, but you could have broken his nose. You punched a Jew in the face with such force you damaged him so badly. That means kol chaloso ki halo harashoim la'asas, because what you've done, anybody who strikes with a fist another Jew, the Gemara says, the Gemara in Sanhedrin, is called a Rosha. So at the end of this verse, in verse 19, it says you've only done, you have to pay, obviously, for the medical bills, and you have to pay for the lost wages. But that's all. That's right. That's all you've done. But there's another account to be paid, and that's why it says a double expression: "Rapa yirapa." You will heal him. You will heal him. Two healings. You'll heal him, and there's another healing. You've got to heal yourself. Your bad character traits, the bad part of your personality that's sick, that led you to be able to do this, that has to be dealt with as well. How does it start? It starts with just a verbal exchange, words. There is this really stupid phrase in English, which is sticks and stones will break my bones, but words will never hurt me. What nonsense. Words can hurt enormously. Words can be the pebble that leads to an avalanche of hate, an avalanche of conflict. I knew two brothers-in-law who were locked in a conflict over the inheritance of the father. And somebody wanted to draw me into this. I'm not sure which side he was on. He wanted to draw me into an argument, to the argument. And I knew both these brothers-in-law, and I liked them both enormously. And the fellow started to try and tell me the whole story, but what it was all about. I said, please forgive me. I don't want to know what it's all about. And if you forgive me, I don't think you know what it's all about. What really was it that caused this conflict between the brothers, which seems to be about inheritance? But maybe it's about something more than that. Maybe the father-in-law, their joint father-in-law, spoke in a way that one felt slighted compared to the other, sort of Yaakov and Esav type thing. Who knows how this started, when it started, what was the kernel, what was the tiny seed which has now grown into a bitter wormwood tree, causing all sorts of very, very hard feelings and terrible animosity to break out between the two. Who knows what that is? I don't know. I don't think you know, and I don't want to know. But certainly, it's what starts at the beginning, and it can even be words. Sticks and stones will break my bones, and words will never hurt me. Oh, yes, they will, because from words can grow so much more, so much more. So, I mean, you can see obviously a very good example of that is the words used by President Trump that he wants to make Canada the 51st state in his unique way of speaking. Whether he literally means it, genuinely means it, who knows? Because he does tend to say these extreme things without it to be a bargaining position. But if you saw in the papers, it was that fight, that physical fight between the two players in the ice hockey teams of the American team and the Canadian team. That was it coming to blows, the little words. And sometimes, I mean, I can think of things that people said to me when I was a kid that hurt me deeply then. And still, when I think about them, it still hurts. Interesting stuff. Sometimes you see somebody carves a heart on a tree, and it's, AB loves CD. But it was obviously carved a long time ago. Over time, it has stretched. So instead of being deep, but it's still there, but it's larger. It can be that, things, especially when this was carved on a tree when it was young and tender, just barely a sapling, treelet, whatever the stage being sapling and tree is, I'm not sure. But it stays and it grew. Who says that words are harmless? So it all starts with words. So says the Alshich. Shlomo HaMelech, we say, was the wisest man who ever lived. And he says something which is very interesting. And then we'll go back and look at another Alshich. At least I hope we will. Finding the paper, which I was hoping was going to be popping out at me. It is popping out at me. Good. Here is in the book of Mishli, Proverbs. And Proverbs are, of course, even at one simple level, they're just pieces of wisdom. Of course, the language used by Shlomo HaMelech was precise and exact, and it opens up connections to all sorts of other Jewish ideas all the way through the Talmud, the Kabbalistic ideas, etc. So there's tremendous layer after layer after layer of message that he's trying to, simultaneous messages that the words of the simple message is also conveying when you dig deeply. I mean, here's one of the most famous sayings of all, and you'll find this in chapter 27, and it's verse 19 in Proverbs, Mishli. Kamaim haponim leponim, just like water does for a face, ponim leponim, to another face, see what that means in a minute. Kain lev ha'odam la'odam. The heart of a man is to the heart of another man. What on earth is that talking about? So the idea is like this. If you find a pool with smooth water and you look into it, it acts as a mirror. You wink, and of course you see yourself winking back. It acts as a mirror. The heart of a person. So really, the posset really goes the other way about towards the end. Leva odom la odom. The heart of a person will be reflected in the other's heart, just as water reflects you. If you love somebody, if you sincerely are concerned about them, then what's in your heart will come through your eyes, through your face, and go into his eyes and into his heart. And you will get what will be a reciprocation. The affection that you feel towards him will be mirrored back at you. Interesting idea. So he goes into this now with the commentary of the Vilna Gaon. So now we're going a little bit more deeper than I told you, and he says a very, very interesting. Commercial Odom Dovet Bashem, Kena Kodesh Baruch Dovet Boy. As a person is attached to Hashem and feels himself attached to Hashem and sees himself and acts with that consciousness of that attachment, that relationship is mirrored. Hashem feels that intensity of relationship to you. If it's a constant, total infatuation, if that's the right word, of you towards Hashem, he will be, as it were, just as infatuated, just as focused on you. And on the throne of God, whatever, I mean, obviously we're talking, God doesn't have a throne, it's not a physical thing, it's an insight for us to relate to. But apparently God sits on a throne in heaven, whatever all that means. But on the throne of God, there is the likeness of a man. Jacob Avinu, actually, Jacob. So therefore is a face of the Cain calling the beam, and not only that, all of the prophets saw God having a physical human form. Famous story, Moshe Rabbeinu going up to Mount Sinai, and he sees Hashem wearing tefillin. He sees the knot at the back of the tefillin. He says Hashem is having a head, a human head. Of course he doesn't, but it speaks to us because it's God to speak in the language, our language. We see God in taking physical form, our physical form, so because that's how we relate to him and he relates to us. He, as it were, puts himself into our shoes. The more we are attached to him, the more he's attached to us. And he understands us, and we see him understanding us, and we see him taking, as it were, presenting himself to us. That's a better way. Appearing to us in human form. It's so that we understand that he understands us as a human being. He knows what we're going through. So, a beautiful idea. However, the Vilna Gaon said something else, which is not always included in the standard commentary of the Vilna Gaon, but he says something else in that, which I'm going to share with you as well. Very interesting. And he said the following thing. On the letters of the Aleph base, there is two parts to a Hebrew letter. Now, the first one is called Aleph. That is to say, Aleph, Lamed, Fe, Fe, Aleph, Aleph, right? So the only bit that when you see the letter Aleph, now what do you say? I'm trying to make it look a bit like an Aleph. You say it's an Aleph, but that's the A. The Le and the Fe is not written there. You can write it out fully as Aleph, Lamed, Fe, but we only see the Aleph, right? Base is spelled base, Yud, Sof, right? But we only say base. So the open bit, the first letter, and the two other letters. So very often he says, or very seldom, are the value of the first letter and the other letters equal. For example, sounded South African. For example, an Aleph is 1, right? Aleph. But a Lamed is 30, and a Pei is 80. So that's 110. So the value of the first letter is 1. And then the rest of the Aleph, the Lif, is 110. Totally different values. Base is 2. And then Yud is 10, and Sof, base, that is 410. And sometimes it's the other way about. Sometimes the value of the first letter is greater than the other components. So Ayin, it's a good one. Ayin is 70, right? Ayin, first letter, Ayin, Yud, and Nun. Ayin is 70, Yud 10, Nun 50. Together it's 60. So in this case, the first letter is greater, and there are many like that. But very seldom do you get a letter which is the exact same. Mem you do. Mem's the same. Because how do you spell mem? The letter mem, if you say it as a word, it's mem mem. So numerical value of mem is 40. So 40 and 40. How about yud? Yud, number 10. Then the first letter is yud, is 10. The vav, the next two letters, vav and daled, 4 and 6, is also 10. That's also 10. So word mayim is mem, yud, mem. In the word mayim, then it is, interesting this, mem, you've got all the component letters are the same both ways. The hidden and the open. The mem, the first letter, is 40. And the last letter is also mem. They've got the same value. So if we look at the posset with that key, then what do you get? Kemayim haponim laponim. Why did he choose the moshel, the analogy of water? Like water which faces our face is looking into, then you'll see the same face. It will look back at you. The mem is the mem. The values are the same. And when does that happen? It's when Lev ha'odam la'odam. It's when your heart is directed towards somebody else. When your heart is focused on somebody else, his heart or her heart will be focused equally back towards you. It will be the same, it will be a mirroring of one of the other. So let's end with another Alshich, and this is the Alshich's commentary on Pirkei Avos in my, yes, I just dug out my translation of, because I translated the Alshich of Pirkei Avos. I printed this out, and there is right at the beginning of Pirkei Avos, it's Mishnah 6. It says, Yeshua ben Prachia and not our Bailey. So two great rabbis, and they say the following thing. Yeshua ben Prachia says, make for yourself a rabbi and acquire for yourself, kone, literally buy for yourself a friend, and judge everybody favorably. So in the Alshich, there's a ton to say in that, but let's just keep it simple and see if we can tie this all together. So you have to get yourself a rabbi. That's the first thing. Everybody needs a rabbi. You need somebody who will teach you Torah. And interesting, halakhically, you're not allowed, there's all sorts of stuff to talk about this, but you're not allowed to charge somebody for teaching them Torah. There's a workaround, because otherwise how can rabbis survive? Say that they're really being paid for the preparation. But the actual act of teaching somebody Torah should be a mitzvah in its own right, and you can't charge them. You can charge a friend, or you can pay a friend, and that's a different thing. You can't pay a rabbi, but you can pay a friend. So you might say to yourself like this. So the role of a friend could be, we've got a rabbi, or I've got a rabbi, I go and learn with him, but I need to go over this over and over again before it's going to sink in. So I'll get a chavrusa, I will get a friend, and I'll learn with him. You might, says the Alshich, I'll read this a little bit to you, if you do succeed in getting a rov, can't pay him, you struggle to understand and retain what you've been taught, then get yourself a chavrusa. So, get a rabbi, buy a chavrusa. This time you're allowed to pay even a high price. A chaver is not like a rabbi who's forbidden to charge. But you might turn around and say, oh, I'll learn from a rabbi and then I'll learn on my own. Who needs a chaver? Well, don't forget that one of the most fundamental Jewish messages of all is that the Torah begins with letter base, 2. Chavrusa is 2. The Talmud starts on page 2, not Aleph. There's an expectation, and almost a universal necessity to learn it with a chavrusa. And your learning will be a much higher quality. But, says the Alshich, perhaps you'll say, I'll learn from a rabbi and then I'll review what I've learned alone without needing to pay a chaver. And not only that, there'll be a benefit for that. If I learn my own, I'll be not drawn into talking and gossiping about others as we're discussing, what we're talking about. It's something very commonly happens to your chavrusa. You're learning about somebody who's a thief, or you're learning somebody who's done something else, and something like that has just happened in the community. Oh yeah, well, it's just like, and now you end up talking Lashon Hara. So therefore, it's better for me to learn my own, because as soon as I'm learning with somebody, there's a great possibility of us stumbling together in the conversation into inappropriate areas. Well, that's why it says the final part of the Mishnah, teaching the Mishnah, don everybody, judge everybody favorably. Don lachaskus. Remember what we said about every fight starts with words? Think of the fight between Yosef and the brothers. Yeah, with words, with accusations, which got to murder or near murder in that case. It's the exact same thing. If only the brothers had been able to convince themselves, which is what you have to do to be Don Lachaskas. You have to convince yourself what the other person seems to have done against you is in actual fact not what they did. There's a possibility it wasn't that. It's assuming that the person is not a completely evil person with a track record of being evil, in which case you don't have to assume the best. But if the person is an ordinary person, or certainly if he's a tzaddik, then you just have to assume that maybe you've got it wrong. And then it doesn't escalate from there. And at the very worst, you go and say to them, it seems to me that you did such and such. And then so often when you do this mitzvah, what happens is you find a completely different narrative to the one that you imagined, the only one you imagine could possibly have taken place. And the consequence of that is, wow, you've retained a friend. So how would it be that to do that is because you have to want to find the good in the person. So if you're learning together and that you might be tempted to speak about somebody else, but because your attitude is, I want to think nice about Jews, and as long as you get that formula, Rabbi of Rusa, and I want to think good about Jews, then there'll be no danger. If only we could be thinking good about Jews, if only we could be thinking good about each other, then indeed there would be not the danger if we all come together in Birkas, in Birkas Chodesh, as we said before. If we're all together, isn't that what's putting itself in great danger? Only if there's fighting between us, only if there's bad words, and bad words come, Lashon Hara comes from a lack of love between Jews. If we get that right, we bring the Mashiach. We force his hand. And then, of course, we can all be together. But just a little word, a little pebble, can start an avalanche of pain and hurt and generational vendettas. It all starts by getting rid of the desire for speaking bad about somebody, and that's wiped out by the mitzvah of a love somebody else the way that you would love yourself. See you next week. Hope you have a wonderful week.